40 years had passed since Moses fled the opulence and danger of Pharaoh's court, a self-imposed exile deep in the Midian wilderness. The former prince of Egypt, raised in absolute luxury, had settled into the mundane life of a humble shepherd. He had traded his royal robes for simple desert garments, his military training for the patient tending of flocks. His dreams of rescuing his Hebrew people had long since faded into the dust of the barren desert floor. He was a quiet, forgotten man, content with his anonymity, convinced that his moment of destiny had utterly passed. Moses, the Hebrew baby saved from the Nile, now believed his purpose was simply to exist in the shadows. He was a man defined by failure, fear, and profound unworthiness. One ordinary day, while leading his flock far into the remote recesses of the wilderness, Moses approached Horeb, the mountain of God. The environment was stark, silent, and utterly unchanged for centuries, a place of isolated spiritual significance. As he guided the weary sheep, his eye caught a startling, impossible sight that defied the natural laws of the desert. A bush, common and unremarkable, was ablaze with fierce, brilliant fire. The flames licked at the branches with intense heat, yet the plant itself was not consumed or damaged. The visual contradiction was stunning, immediately heightening the tension of the scene. Moses paused, his curiosity overpowering his caution, compelled to investigate this stunning phenomenon. He recognized immediately that this was not a natural occurrence. The bush defied the basic principles of combustion. "I will go over and see this strange sight," he muttered, cautiously taking a step closer to the radiant heat. He was drawing near a boundary, a place where the divine intersected with the mundane. The tension of his approach was palpable, the air vibrating with an unseen, terrifying presence. He was moving from the realm of the ordinary into the territory of the sacred and the miraculous. As Moses drew near, a powerful, commanding voice suddenly spoke to him directly from the heart of the flames. The voice was authoritative, deep, and utterly unmistakable in its divine origin. "Moses! Moses!" the voice called out, using his name twice, a signal of intimate, profound attention. Moses, humbled and astonished, immediately responded with the ancient acknowledgement of submission. "Here I am." He stood trembling before the fiery manifestation, instantly realizing he was in the presence of something incomprehensible. The tension of the direct personal call pierced his solitude. The voice delivered a solemn, urgent instruction, establishing a boundary between the human and the holy. "Do not come any closer," the presence commanded, stopping Moses in his tracks with an invisible force. The Lord then delivered the reason for the command, revealing the sacred nature of the ground itself. "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." This was a directive of reverence and purification, demanding the removal of worldly dirt and the recognition of hallowed space. Moses' heart pounded with a mix of dread and profound awe as he obeyed the sudden, powerful decree. He instinctively understood he was in God's immediate, terrifying presence. The voice identified itself, revealing an ancient, immutable connection to Moses' heritage. "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." This declaration immediately tied the miraculous event to the covenant promises of the past. Hearing the name of his revered ancestors, Moses was overwhelmed by the magnitude of the encounter. He immediately hid his face, unable to bear the searing, unveiled glory of the divine presence. The tension of unworthiness was acute. No man could look upon God and live, and Moses felt the weight of that truth. God then revealed the compassionate reason for this astonishing, fiery appearance. He had seen the suffering of his people in Egypt. "I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt," the Lord declared, his voice filled with empathetic resolve. He had heard their anguished cries under the brutal yoke of Pharaoh and the Egyptian taskmasters. The divine heart was moved by the sheer depth of their oppression and endless toil. God's mission was clear. He was coming down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians. The tension shifted from fear of God to the anticipation of a colossal national deliverance. Then came the staggering world-changing instruction, the core of the divine plan. "So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." The simple command was a monumental task, a mission of leadership thrust upon the most unlikely candidate. Moses, the fugitive shepherd, was suddenly commanded to confront the most powerful empire on earth. The burden of this impossible task instantly crashed down upon him, overwhelming his sense of inadequacy. The tension of this unexpected mandate was palpable, threatening to crush the man who had long since resigned himself to insignificance. Moses immediately recoiled from the command, his self-doubt erupting into a stammering protest. "Who am I," he pleaded with genuine anguish, "that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" His entire identity was rooted in his failure. The 40 years of solitary exile validated his unworthiness. He saw himself as a timid, failed fugitive, not a bold national deliverer. The magnitude of the task was not the problem. The problem was his own deep conviction of his incompetence. The tension centered on Moses' human frailty, pitted against God's infinite power. God countered Moses' protest not with a description of his hidden abilities, but with an unwavering promise of divine presence. "I will be with you," the Lord declared, a profound assurance that redefined the very nature of leadership. The success of the mission would not depend on Moses' strength or eloquence, but on God's active, constant companionship. The proof of this promise would be a future act of worship on this very mountain after the people's liberation. This simple declaration neutralized Moses' question of "Who am I?" by asserting the greater reality of "Who is with you?" Moses, still seeking clarity and reassurance, moved the negotiation to a strategic point, the question of divine identity. "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" This was a crucial question of theology and authority, demanding a name that carried absolute, unquestionable power. The tension lay in revealing a name that transcended all Egyptian deities and solidified the covenant. The world waited for the answer that would define the Creator. God delivered the answer, a stunning, profound revelation that forms the cornerstone of monotheistic faith. "I am who I am." This declaration, often rendered as YHWH, was a statement of eternal, self-existent being, not bound by time or circumstance. The name signifies God's absolute sovereignty and changeless fidelity. He simply is. Moses was commanded to tell the people, "I am has sent me to you." This self-designation was a promise that God was actively present in their past, their present bondage, and their future deliverance. The tension of uncertainty dissolved into the revelation of the everlasting name. God then provided Moses with a detailed step-by-step strategy for confronting the Egyptian powers. He was to gather the elders of Israel and present the entire divine plan for their liberation and journey to the Promised Land. God guaranteed the successful reception of his message. "They will listen to your voice." The Lord then described the inevitable confrontation with Pharaoh, predicting the tyrannical ruler's immediate, stubborn refusal to comply. This pre-announced resistance created a renewed tension, signaling the coming clash between divine will and human obstinance. God revealed the terrifying escalation necessary to force Pharaoh's hand. "I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with all the wonders that I will perform among them." The plan involved a devastating series of supernatural acts, a demonstration of power designed to dismantle the entire Egyptian pantheon. It was a promise of 10 earth-shattering plagues, leading to the eventual violent surrender of the Egyptians. The tension of the coming confrontation was now amplified by the promise of catastrophic divine intervention. The rescue would come through a spectacular display of cosmic warfare. Moses, still utterly unconvinced of his personal suitability, offered a second, desperate protest concerning his own capacity to perform the mission. "But behold, they will not believe me nor listen to my voice," he argued, reverting back to his fears of rejection. He claimed a perceived lack of credibility, believing the elders would dismiss him as a powerless madman. God immediately countered this doubt by asking a simple, profound question about his shepherd's staff. "What is that in your hand?" This was the instrument of his current, ordinary life about to be transformed into a symbol of divine authority. The Lord then performed the first of 3 dramatic miracles intended to equip Moses with unquestionable signs of divine power. Moses threw his staff onto the ground, and it instantly and horrifyingly turned into a serpent. The reptile, a powerful symbol in Egyptian royalty, was a terrifying manifestation of power. Moses instinctively fled from the sudden slithering presence, demonstrating his very human fear. He was commanded to grab the snake by the tail, and as he did, it immediately reverted back into a harmless wooden staff. The tension of transformation showcased God's ability to use the mundane to command the terrifying. The second miracle involved a quick, visceral transformation of Moses' own body. He was instructed to put his hand inside his cloak, a simple act of covering. When he drew it out, his hand was suddenly and visibly leprous, as white as snow, a terrifying symbol of ritual impurity and disease. He then quickly placed his hand back inside his cloak and drew it out again, and it was instantly restored to its normal, healthy state. This sign proved that Moses possessed the power of life and death, an undeniable, potent sign for the skeptical Israelites. The third sign was a promise of elemental control, designed to further solidify his authority over the natural world. If the Israelites remained unconvinced by the first two signs, he was to take water from the Nile River. When he poured the water onto the dry ground, it would immediately turn to blood. This sign, which would later become the first plague, demonstrated his power over the very source of Egyptian life. Moses was now equipped with a portfolio of undeniable supernatural credentials, removing all rational excuse for doubt. Yet Moses offered one final desperate objection, perhaps the most honest of all. "Oh, my Lord, I am not eloquent," he confessed, admitting his profound difficulty with public speaking. He claimed to be slow of speech and slow of tongue, a debilitating limitation for the leader of a massive nation. This was his deepest insecurity. The flaw he believed rendered him totally unusable for the diplomatic and persuasive task ahead. The tension here is Moses' absolute self-rejection versus God's absolute self-sufficiency. God's final response was a firm, definitive rebuke that silenced all further arguments and confirmed his sovereignty over all human ability. Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Is it not I, the Lord? The question asserted God's ultimate power over all human capacity, including speech. God designated Aaron, Moses' eloquent brother, to be his spokesman, working in partnership. The story of the burning bush is the ultimate proof that God equips the called by supplying his own power, where human ability fails, transforming the hesitant, unworthy fugitive into the greatest prophet in Israel's history.